In this video article, I'm going to pick out 3 ideas from Jamerson's bassline on Heatwave, and I'm going to use them to create a new bassline in a kind of up-tempo Motown style on chords very similar to Can't Buy Me Love, but in the key of G rather than the key of C. Now, before we get started, here's a screenshot of my Amazon author page. Currently, I've got 27 books live and on Amazon. There'll be a few more over the coming weeks and months, so depending on when you watch this and when you go check it out, there may be more than 27. This is as good a place as any to go and look at some of the reviews. If you don't know who I am, see what people say about my teaching and the information I present. The book most germane to this video is probably Learning from James Jamerson Volume 1. So go and look at the reviews on that. There's some really interesting ones. Okay, so a while ago, I got a student email which was following up on the video article I did recently called Swinging the Beatles. Now, I'll put a link in the description below this video to that video so you can see that as well if you've not seen it. Basically, that video was about the student who emailed me for that resulted in that video wanted to play some Beatles lines in a kind of, or some Beatles songs rather, in a kind of Michael Bublé swing-esque kind of feel. So I created some lines based on McCartney's vocabulary and added a few other things and did some variations to show the kind of things that you could do. Now, after I did that, I got an email from another student and he asked if I could do something similar, but turning into more of an up-tempo Motown-esque kind of exercise. We talked and went back and forth on emails, and the song that really came up as an example to kind of try and follow was Heatwave by Martha Reeves. Great song, great bass line, but in my memory, Jamerson's bassline on Heatwave was a lot more dynamic than it actually is. But there are still some ideas that I found that we can lift and use to create an up-tempo bassline for the chord changes of that section of Can't Buy Me Love in the key of G. So that's what we're going to do. Before we do, however, I'm going to show you one of the McCartney-esque lines that came from the previous video, and then I'll play it with a new practice track that I've generated in Band in a Box. I'll talk about that in a moment. Here's the line. It's nice and simple. There's nothing wild and exciting going on there. It's all foundational devices. And again, if you haven't seen the Swinging the Beatles video, then go and check that out because I'll talk more about that in that video. So here's the video of that example, and what I did in Band in a Box, it ships with a style called up-tempo Motown swing or up-tempo Motown pop, something like that. And I tweaked a couple of the instruments to give us a slightly different style. So if you listen to the Swinging the Beatles examples, they have a very different feel in terms of the practice track. But this is the bass line, and note that I'm playing the notes quite short to kind of replicate that kind of 60s feel where players had flat wound strings that didn't kind of last that long. Start talking about lifting ideas from Heatwave. I'm going to borrow several ideas and I'm going to use them to layer onto the previous line, and we'll probably only maintain 2 or 3 of those bars. The first idea is a really jazzy idea. And so what you would do is you'd go from the root down to the lower chromatic note, then back to the root, and then to the lower chromatic approach to the next chord. So for G7 moving to C7, it would look like this. So you'd be playing G, F sharp, G, B natural. Now, Jamerson used this idea in a lot of his lines, but in situations where the chord roots were moving in ascending major seconds. So if it was G, it would be going from, say, G to A. And so what he would do in that scenario, he'd play G, F sharp, G, G sharp. And those notes should sound really dissonant, the notes on beats 2 and 4. But because he's using and playing root notes on the harmonically strong beats, which are beats 1 and 3, what happens is any tension you feel with those notes caused by them playing against the harmony is resolved when you get to the target beats that are the harmonically strong notes, and it actually makes those harmonically strong notes sound more predictable. So this is what that device would look like going from G7 to C7, but no, in the instance I just outlined, G to A, that was one of Jamerson's favourite devices. He used it in quarter note level, like in Heatwave, and there are loads of songs where he used it at an 8th note level, and also some songs where he used it at a 16th note level. Again, go and see the video I did on the different rhythmic applications of devices so that you can see how a quarter note device can be used at different rhythmic levels. So that's the first idea we're going to borrow. The second idea we're going to borrow goes from the root to the octave, then it goes down to the 5th, and then it goes back to the root. That looks like this. So you've got G to the octave G to D, back to low G. Now again, this was lifted from the intro verse of Heatwave, where Jamerson's playing from F minor to G minor before he then goes to C minor. And what's great about this device when you're doing it moving in minor seconds or major seconds is because you land back on the root note, that's a natural approach note of a root note of the following chord. So what it allows you to do is to create vertical lines in your bass lines where the chord changes move in a very linear way, which is quite, even though this is a basic device, it's just like a variation of Route 585, which is a really common device in all bass lines of the 60s. I think it's number 4 in my list of bass lines. It's either 4 or 3. It's one of the really early foundational ones. So it's a really common device. But by just changing the note order around, Jamerson allows this device to be used to move from a chord to the next chord, where the next chord is maybe a minor second or a major second above, and get that vertical movement of the root to 8. And also, if you were playing this at a different rhythmic level, so at 8th note, what it would also do for Jamerson, because he only played with one finger, it would allow you to play that one finger on the octave and then play the 5th on the string below and then the root on the string below that, and basically rake through with one movement of the plucking hand. In this chordal context, it also works quite well because the G that you finish the device on is the lower dominant approach note to C, so that sounds quite good. And what you'll see when we get to the finished example is I'm going to do a variation of this device and make it root 8/5, so move the notes around a little bit more. So that's a really consonant idea that can be used on chords of any quality because there are no thirds in the device. Works really well when you're connecting chord roots that are close together as well, but it works well if the chords are moving in fourths like they are here. The third idea I'm going to borrow is from the riff part of Heatwave, and if you listen to Heatwave you'll know what I mean, and it could be a 2-bar idea as well, and here's what I've got in G7, and what I've done is it's just a simple 8-6-5-3. But what Jamerson did, the original in Heatwave, was in E flat. And so he would play E flat down to C to B flat to G. And he was playing in first position. And then he would use the open D string, the lower chromatic approach to E flat, as a pickup note on the last kind of 8th note of the 2-bar pattern. So you can see that replicated here in this 4-bar exercise, which you could use as an exercise. If you want to hear what it sounds like, pause the video, get your bass out, and just play this simple line, and then hear that F sharp again should be a really dissonant note, but it's played so shortly that what it actually does is it makes the G that sounds after it sound logical and really strong because it dissolves all the tension's released that's created by using that F sharp in the first place. So that's, in an ideal scenario, we'd have had 2 or 3 more really cool ideas to pick, but as I said, I remembered this line being much more advanced than it actually is. There's lots of root notes, lots of times where Jamerson just plays 4 root notes and then we'll play a couple of pickup notes in a triplet on the end to get to the next chord. But what I can do is layer these ideas on and leave a couple of McCartney's ideas, and this is the example that I came up with. And so what we've got in the first 3 bars, we've got that 8-6-5-3, but in bar 2 we've got that lower chromatic pickup on the and of beat 4. In bar 4 I've got root lower chromatic, root lower chromatic. You'll be able to hear what that sounds like. The only dissonant note there is the F sharp on beat 2, but you should barely register it. In bar 5, I used an 8-6-5, but I didn't want to go down to the 3 for this bar, so I went back to the 6, and you'll hear when I play that makes the root note on the downbeat of bar 6 sound reasonably logical. And then I kept a McCartney idea. Well, it's not a McCartney idea. Jamerson used this idea in lots of his lines too, the root 3-4 chromatic to get from C to G7. On that G7 chord, starting at bar 7, I've got 8-6-5-3, and then another, this is a McCartney idea, root 3-4. And I used that idea because I wanted to get a linear approach to the D on the downbeat of bar 9, so I could play root 8-5 root and then play C. So I talked about this device being used when the chord roots are close together. It works going either ascending or descending. I've used it descending here. Then on bar 11, I've used root, lower chromatic, root, and then I've gone down to the lower chromatic of G7. Both of those notes, the B natural and the F sharp on beat 2 and 4, should sound dissonant, but they don't. All they do is they set up the harmonically strong notes that come after them. And then in the final bar, I talked about changing the root 8-5-8 root order around, and I've got root 8-5. And again, if you were playing that kind of device at an 8th note level, remember Jamerson could jump to the octave and play the octave, the 5th, and then the low root note, which finishes the exercise off, basically with one plucking hand stroke by raking. So when you're analysing Jamerson's stuff, you always got to be look for where he might be choosing devices, not necessarily because he likes the sound of them, but because they facilitate his one finger plucking hand style. So here's what that sounds like. So, closing out, analysing existing bass lines that you like or by bass players you like is a great way for you to find ideas that you can add to your repertoire. I'll be doing this in future video articles, picking a bass line, picking out some ideas that you can use. I'm going to do more Jamerson, I'm going to do some Pino Palladino lines, I'm going to do some blues lines, maybe Tommy Shannon, or a line that I really love is Carl Radle's line on Key to the Highway from the first Dominoes album. There's some interesting things on there that I can pick out and show you. So there'll be more videos like this where you've got ideas and you can just go, wow, I really like the sound of that idea, and you can take it away and practice it and add it to your vocabulary of ideas. If you want to start building your foundational collection of Jamerson style devices, then the best way probably is to start with this book, Learning from James Jamerson Volume 1. You can find this on your local Amazon. I went this back. Let's do that again. If you purchase it new and send me a copy of your invoice, then I'll add you to the online version. And in the online version, all the examples are played. I usually play them twice. So here you've only seen them played once, but normally I play them twice. I play them once at performance tempo with some kind of realistic, real-world sounding practice track, and then I'll play them slower so you can really have a look at fingers if you need to, see what I'm doing. And that's usually done with a chordal metronome, which is a drum beat which is very metronomic, and then just a block piano chord at each chord change. So very simple, but really helps you look at things in a little more detail. There's some bonus lessons and there's some MP3s to download. So you can go and check that out. Go to your local Amazon, have a look. One important idea to mention, this book isn't about trying to play like James Jamerson. It's about taking ideas from his playing that you can apply to your playing. Playing exactly like James Jamerson is probably could be done, but you don't want to be a Jamerson clone. but it is a much better thing to aspire to take ideas that you really like the sound of from his playing and add them to your playing, and that's what this book is all about. So thank you for your time with this video. I'll catch you in the next video.